Hello, and welcome to today's program, Rapid Reaction, Unpacking the Korean Election. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Chelsie Alexandre, and I'm the Policy Program Officer here at the Korea Society. We are delighted to be joined today by Professor Gi-Wook Shin to discuss the outcome of yesterday's highly impactful Korean general elections. I'm really looking forward to Professor Shin's analysis and takeaways from the results. Before we jump into the discussion, I would like to take a moment to introduce today's esteemed guest. Professor Gi-Wook Shin is the William J. Perry Professor of Contemporary Korea in Sociology and the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies, the director of the Walter H. Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center, and the founding director of the Korea Program, all at Stanford University. As a historical comparative and political sociologist, his research is concentrated on social movements, nationalism, development, democracy, and international relations. He is the author and editor of almost 30 books on Korea and Asia. Last summer, Professor Shin launched the Stanford Next Asia Policy Lab, also known as SNAPPLE, which is a new initiative committed to addressing emergent social, cultural, economic, and political challenges in Asia. In collaboration with the Korea Foundation for Advanced Studies, he also established an annual meeting of the Sustainable Democracy Roundtable last summer, bringing together scholars of diverse disciplines to foster collaborations aimed to improve the trajectory of democracy. We are very grateful to have him here with us today. And before we delve into the conversation, I want to thank the Korea Foundation and our corporate sponsors, the names of which are prominently displayed in our lobby, for making this program possible. I also want to note that we are welcoming your questions live, so please send any questions you have throughout the program to policy@koreasociety.org. And with that, I will turn it over to Professor Shin to set the scene for us regarding the elections in Korea.
Thank you, Chelsea, for a very kind introduction. And I did a similar analysis 4 years ago with the Korea Society, and I'm very happy to back to this seminar. And at the time, that was in the beginning of the pandemic, and then people were watching how Korea was going to conduct election during the pandemic, and they did pretty well. And I'm very happy to do again 4 years later. So obviously, pandemic is over, but still, this Zoom seminar, I guess, a legacy of the pandemic, which is pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess many of you read already election outcomes in the media. So let me present some basic outcome and also share my thoughts and reflections. And then I'm happy to engage with any questions from the audience. So, as you know, the outcome was pretty much expected. There was no, big surprise for me personally, even though the opposition did a little better than I thought. And as you can see on the screen, the ruling party, PPP, only obtained 108 seats. And the opposition got 202 seats. And then I think other than 3 seats by Reform Party, they all belong to the liberal side. So politically or ideologically, liberal side made landslide victory this time. I think this gap is probably the largest, the biggest loss for the conservative. And if you look at breakdown, so Democratic Party 175 and People's Party only 108 once again. And if you can see that Rebuilding Korea Party led by Mr. Joguk got 12. That was one surprise. And I think I'll come back to that later. And Reform Party, led by Lee Jun-suk, it didn't do as well, but still, its leader, Lee Jun-suk, got elected. I think that has some important implication for the future of Korean politics, which I'll come back as well. In terms of regional distribution, it's very clear that the red This is for ruling party. And they lost badly in Seoul, Gyeonggi area, which has more seats. So in a sense, now the ruling party has become almost like a regional party based on Gyeongsang and partly Gangwon province. So they're more on the eastern side of Korea. So I think in big picture, in a sense, this election was a rematch between President Yoon Suk Yeol and Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung, who lost last presidential election by a thin margin, like less than 1%. And then I think this time, Lee won, in big way. And now Democratic Party really became Lee Jae-myung's party. So as you know, Lee Jae-myung has a lot of legal issues, but still he has strong popular support, and I think he will be a leading candidate for next president if he can deal with all legal issues. So in a sense, Korea is somewhat similar to United States because now Trump is back and running for president again, despite a lot of legal issues. And Lee Jae-myung is somewhat similar, and this is something that we can watch over time. The second point is very high, voter turnout. And the final result shows about 67%. I think that's the highest turnout rate for general election since 1992. And both conservative and liberals, they were able to mobilize their supporters and bring them to the booth. And similar to the last presidential election, where outcome was decided by a thin margin, once again less than 1%. A highly contested election in many districts. The margins are only like hundreds or 1,000 votes. So in many areas, the contest was really severe, and then some winners were elected by a very thin margin. And that left really little space for third party. So other than Gi-Wook's party, which is basically a liberal party, only Lee Jun-suk's party was able to get 3 seats, and then there's no major challenge by third party towards 2 main political parties. And certainly, this election shows increased political division and polarization, which will be a major issue for Korean politics in the coming years. Okay, third point I want to make is that this election was basically a verdict on Yoon's performance. There were, very high anti-Yoon sentiments. Yoon has been suffering from low approval ratings for last 2 years, only like in the 30s. And I mean, in a sense, this election is similar to midterm election in the United States, where ruling party usually has a hard time, winning. But even so, I think everyone knew that this will be a very tough election for PPP, and I think they knew also, but was not able to effectively deal with anti-Yoon sentiment. So I think Yoon Suk Yeol will be first South Korean president whose party didn't control the assembly for at least some portion of his term. And then he's likely to fall into early lame duck. I mean, he still has 3 years in office. And, with his party being minority in the parliament, he will have a lot of challenges in implementing his major policy agenda. So certainly, the election outcome was bad news for him and his party. And if you look at a little more deeply, why PPP lost election, one thing I want to point out is that their campaign strategy was not much effective, and the party was not able to present a new vision for the country, and they were able to appeal to core conservative voters, but failed to reach out to the swing voters, which will decide the election, as in the United States. And out of emergency, they brought Han Dong-un to lead this election. Just like Yoon Suk Yeol, Han was a career public prosecutor and didn't have really political experience until he came to lead the ruling party. And in my view, he more focused on short-term tactics, trying to win certain district, but I don't think he had any good strategy to win the whole war, not just a few battles. And then, despite being a fresh new face, Han was largely seen as Yoon's protege, because they were very close to each other for a long time. And also, if you look at voting pattern by age, so this is votes by age and gender. So if you can see that, like the older people, like 60 and older, they predominantly support the ruling party, the red. But those in 40s and 50, they are really in favor of the liberal. So there's a really clear generational gap. And now 20 and 30s, young people became swing voters. And if you see like 20s or less, especially in the female, they really gave strong support for the opposition. And then they are very close between ruling and opposition for young male. So if you remember last presidential election, at the time, Lee Jun-suk was the leader of the current ruling party. He trying to make a generational coalition, especially by courting young male voters. But this time, there's no such strategy. And then actually, they also failed to appeal to young voters as well. So I think that was quite decisive in making outcome in a highly contested district. Okay, then the other one, there wasn't really any major policy debate during election. And I think a lot of personal attacks. And in a sense, you could even say that people made very angry votes and a lot of resentment. And they were not shy of demonizing the other side. Wasn't any respect for democratic value and norm. So some of you may remember that some years ago I began to say that now Korea is facing a crisis in democracy, and 2 years ago we published this book. South Korea's Democracy in Crisis. So there we, warned about, increasing polarization, populism, demonization of the other side. And in a sense, all those concerns that I and my colleague expressed a few years ago, all emerge in this election. So that I think in this sense, it was quite hard to watch the election in a campaign. And one thing interesting is that the rise of Gi-Wook. I showed that his party was created only like a month ago, but his party obtained 12 seats. Okay, so between two large parties, still he was able to obtain 12 seats. And what does it mean? So, as some of you know, Gi-Wook was a professor at Seoul National University, and he was a senior advisor and also Minister of Justice under Moon Jae-in. But then, because of family scandals for fraud in admission for his children, he really fell from grace. And then his wife served prison term. And actually, he himself was sentenced to 2-year prison. So he's still, waiting for the final decision by the Supreme Court. But unless the Supreme Court reverse the court decision, which is not likely, then he'll have to serve 2 years in prison. But nonetheless, he maintains kind of, fandom among liberal voters. And then I think there's some, sentiment that, sure, he and his family did wrong, but then punishment maybe was too harsh, was not fair, especially the current government is not willing to do something similar for Yoon's family or his close people. So I think he was able to sort of galvanize support from really radical liberals. And then, he wasn't shy in saying that he'll try to appoint a special counselor to investigate Han Dong-hoon and First Lady and so on. So in a sense, he was getting, popularity by sort of doing politics of resentment or even revenge. And I don't think it's a healthy sign for Korean democracy. Okay, so what are the larger implications of the election results? I think overall, as I said earlier, the election process shows a lot of problems that we want regarding Korean democracy. And I've been saying crisis in democracy in Korea, but now I can say that in addition to crisis in democracy, Korea is facing crisis in political leadership. And I said this before that both Yoon and Lee Jae-myung, their style is more like a strong man. And I'm not sure whether either leader really respect or value democratic norm and values. And once again, Yoon Suk Yeol is likely to enter early lame duck. And then Lee Jae-myung still facing a lot of legal issues. And the other point is that this election show a huge generational and gender gaps. And I show already here a division by age and gender. And in this election, only 61 seats. In the assembly that has like 300 seats, so only 20% are women. And I think even Korean society's advanced status, it's really low. I mean, only 20% women. And then over 85% of those elected, they are over the age of 50. So huge underrepresentation of women and also young people in Korean politics. Okay, and then one comment I'd like to make is that this election of Lee Jun-suk, as some of you may know, he was leader of the main conservative party. I mean, I think he's only still late 30s. And then I think he was able to help the conservative party to win presidential election and also, provincial election that follows soon after that 2 years ago. But then he was really pushed out. And then he really had a very tough battle to win. I don't think many people really expected him to win the seats, and I didn't expect. But I thought maybe if he was very close to winning, then still it's a political victory for him. But he was able to win, and then also there are a few other young people who got elected in the ruling party. So Lee Jun-suk doesn't represent liberal side. He more represents conservative side. And then maybe, if not now, but I think in the mid to long term, he and some other young people may represent Korean conservatives. So that might be a little, I think, good news, I think, for Korean conservative, in my view. Okay, so finally about, foreign policy and relations, because there's something of interest to American audience. I think overall, you may have to adjust his alliance for, focus policy with the United States. I think he will face some growing political pressure to pay more attention to China and possibly North Korea. And also, momentum that he built with Japan, that may get lost because, as he really worked very hard to improve relations with Japan. But then he, badly lost this election. And also, Prime Kishida's rating is not that great either. So I think that's one area that I'm a little concerned that we may have to watch in the coming months. But nonetheless, this is a general election, not a presidential election. So I don't think there will be any major shifts in foreign policy can be expected. Okay, so my final point is that Korea is facing a lot of challenges, both domestic and geopolitical. High inflation, high household debt, demographic crisis, high youth unemployment, and some people now begin to wonder whether Korea has peaked. Similar to what Japanese were debating 30, 40 years ago. But still, the politics, I mean, it's not really making any good progress. They're really fighting against, in my view, against each other without really talking or having, dialogue. In terms of foreign policy, I mean, dealing with China, Russia, North Korea, or even Taiwan, will give a lot of challenges. So, as a closing remarks, I really hope that Korean politicians understand clear message from people. Then they really need to really collaborate with each other to address a lot of challenges that Korea is facing in the coming years. So, in a sense, they need to recover, politics in good sense, which means that, negotiating and compromising and then, working for the interests of the nation. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, then happy to take any question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Shin, for giving us such a really great broad overview, but also touching on both the domestic political context that we see Korea in, and also foreign policy implications and kind of steps for the Yoon administration in the aftermath of this election. I did want to touch on a few of the points that you made before turning to audience questions. You described how the PPP and the Yoon government's campaign strategy was very short term. It didn't look into long-term perspectives. So I was wondering if you could touch a bit more on some of the dominant issues that were shaping the electorate's preferences. You mentioned a few things like youth unemployment, the demographic crisis, but what was really top of mind for Koreans, and how did the PPP and the DP and other parties kind of address those issues?
Right, I think that's one big disappointment because as you mentioned, also as I mentioned, there are a lot of challenges, social, economic, and other problems. I mean, there are a few issues like for example, like Democratic Party saying we are going to provide to every Korean about $200. Okay, so so offering some cash. Uh, Also, like ruling party, they announced that they're gonna move whole parliament into Sejong. Okay, the kind of administrative, in the capital. But then it's not really new, pledge or issue. So as I said, there wasn't really any, major policy debate. It's a lot of personal attacks, and then a very negative campaign. I mean, campaign always there's some element of negativity, but this was really bad. But that's why I was saying that a lot of concern that we had regarding Korean democracy it really appeared in this election. So that I'm sure Democratic Party is celebrating their victory, but I think they are also responsible for restoring, Korean democracy as they control the parliament.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting that you touch upon kind of the campaign trail tactics used between all of the parties involved. And I was wondering actually if you could touch on some of the key differences between US and Korean elections. I know in the
Mm.
US, our election campaigns can go on for a really long time, and even a year before the vote itself. But in Korea, the timeline is much more compressed. And you have candidates campaigning in public spaces using bullhorns. They have improvised parades, even music video ads. And so, could you speak a little bit more to kind of what the campaign trail looks like in
Mm.
Korea for those unfamiliar, and how you think those differences might affect Korean elections and the nominations even of the candidates?
Well, so one thing is nomination process because in Korea it's really top down. Okay, so and then sometimes they decide candidates only like a month or 2 months ago. And then their official campaign is only allowed for a couple of weeks, very short. Okay, so that's one. Uh, the other one, I don't know. Korea is a smaller country and highly concentrated in certain area. And as you mentioned, some music video, dancing and I don't know, maybe influence of K-pop. But I mean, some people say it's a little more fun. But at the same time, you get a lot of personal attacks, and then yeah, social media's influence is really strong, and there's a lot of concern as well. Like I think YouTube may be more popular in Korea than in this country. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of personal attacks. So I think social media has become very crucial for campaign. But then there's also a big area of concern as well.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think these differences do, as you said, kind of contribute to this negative atmosphere around these elections and also the politics now. And you were mentioning actually one of the kind of splinter parties, Choguk, who was pretty
Yeah.
successful, more liberal, got 12 seats. I was wondering if you could speak to why other third parties, like you mentioned, Lee Jun-suk's party, which got 3 seats, and also Lee Nak-yeon's party, why they probably weren't as successful as Choguk and his party?
Right, so I mentioned already, but let me add a little bit more because okay, even experts were having difficult time to understand
Mhm.
because I don't think anyone really expected his rise. I mean, before his forefront race, he was very popular figure. I mean, he was activist. He has a law degree from UC Berkeley, and he became professor at Seoul National. And then I guess he's quite handsome and speaking very well. And I think probably before his downfall, let's say early days of Moon Jae-in government, I mean he was a leading candidate for president, as well. And I just said, there's some sentiment that, well, he did wrong, his family did wrong, he was very hypocritic. But still, other people saying that even so, punishment was so harsh, wasn't fair. So I think, he ran his campaign only on anti-Yoon or anti-Yoon sentiment. Okay, so I think Democratic Party, even though they were capitalizing on anti-Yoon sentiment, but they are more restrained in making direct attack because it's a big party, right? But Joguk wasn't shy of saying, anything. I mean, he even said that, our first bill is to appoint a special counselor to investigate Han Dong-hun, the leader of the ruling party. Then we are going to investigate also the first lady. So he really appealing to more radical liberals who really did like Yoon and his government. So yeah, that's why I'm saying that's why he was successful. But then he may go to jail, prison. If a Supreme Court upholds
Right.
the current decision.
Right.
And once again, I don't think this is a healthy sign for Korean democracy.
Mhm.
So in a sense, the radicals, okay, it's better to galvanize their supporters and then tend to gain their vote.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you envision any kind of strategic change from either the PPP or the DP moving forward? You mentioned for the PPP that might have to, extend an olive branch with the National Assembly now in order for Yoon to kind of push forward on his agenda. But do you envision that for opposition parties at all as well?
Well, first of all, opposition will control parliament, and I think they
Mhm.
will control, I think, pretty much all the committee. Okay, and then I think they will, passing, bills to promote their policy agenda, and some of them may contradict to what the government wanted to do. So in the last 2 years, Yoon Suk Yeol, he vetoed a lot of major bills. So so one possibility, opposition keep passing bills, and president keep vetoing those bills, right? And then that means Korean politics run into stalemate, and then it can really advance any agenda for future of Korea. I mean that's one possibility. Or hopefully, maybe president may change his style because in the last 2 years, he refused to meet with Lee Jae-myung. Okay, because uh, in I don't know, in president view, Lee Jae-myung maybe is criminal. Maybe that's why I don't know. Maybe that's why maybe he has refused to do. But still, he's a leader of the main party. Now his party controls the parliament. So my view is that you should meet with Lee. I mean, legal process will continue, but still, politics is different from the law, right? So that
Sorry, I can't
uh,
hear anything.
you can't.
I'm so sorry. Give me one moment. No, my headphones.
Can you?
Sorry, Professor Shin, you can keep going.
Okay, so can other people hear? Okay. Yeah, so I think my point is that there's no really meeting between Yoon and Lee for last 2 years. But now maybe hopefully Mr. President may realize the situation, the change, and what the Korean people want. So maybe I think he should meet with Lee Jae-myung and discuss major policy and agenda, how they can cooperate together to advance important policy for Korean society, economy, and politics as well.
Sorry about that. Just a little bit of a technical issue on our end.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. All right, but thank you. I wanted to finally just end on one point about you mentioned some of the implications for kind of domestic politics in Korea following this election, but I was wondering if you had any implication, if there were any implications of these results for the upcoming 2027 presidential election in your mind.
Okay, one thing clear is, Lee Jae-myung will be a leading candidate. Okay, so of course, it's still uncertain whether he can survive all these legal problems because he's on trial right now. So actually, he had to go to the court the day before the election day. Okay, so while he was campaigning, at the same time he had to attend at the courts, I think 2 or 3 times a week. So, and I'm sure there are more maybe accusation and trials. So whether he can survive the legal issue in the next 3 years, and I mean that's what I'm saying. That's why Korea may be very similar to the United States this year because but the legal process may not end by the time that Korea has a presidential election. Then Lee may still run. Then he has, I think, a possibility of being elected as a president because now his party and his support base is very strong. Now, I think more issue for the ruling party in a conservative. Okay, so I mean, last time and this time, it became clear that without appealing to swing voters, only by capturing their conservative base, they're not going to win any major election. Okay, so that probably they'll have to maybe nominate, it might be a more moderate conservative. I mean, there are some candidates like maybe An Cheol-soo, Na Kyung-won, or Oseon, made of Seoul. So probably, or Hong Jin-pyo. So I think there will be probably good competition, and I hope that healthy competition. So I think from the liberal side, if he can address a legal issue, Lee Jae-myung will be the candidate. There's no question. For conservative, I mean, there may be 4 or 5 people competing for the candidacy. But in Korean politics, 3 years a really long time. So you never know. I mean, who expected that Yoon Suk Yeol would become president? Probably, if he asked me like 3 years ago, even 1 year before his election, I said, "There's no way." Okay, so I think 3 years is a long time, but still, what's clear is that Korean people sent a very clear message to the government, to the ruling party, and also all other parties as well. So I hope that the politicians really understand the message from the people.
Right, absolutely. And like you said, you mentioned a crisis in democracy and political leadership. Hopefully, by the time the presidential election comes about, that a lot of that is resolved as well. And so I wanted to take this moment to shift over to some of the questions we've gotten from our audience. As I mentioned at the start of the program, if you have any questions that have come up from Professor Shin's brilliant presentation, please feel free to email your questions over to policy@koreasociety.org. But for now, I have a few questions we've collected from our responses. The first is from a great friend of the Korea Society, Maiko Tekiuchi. And her question is, how do you assess the impact of North Korea's recent provocative attitudes towards South Korea in the results and outcomes that we saw in this election?
So I'm not sure whether I can answer that question directly.
Okay.
But one thing was interesting was that North Korea was not issue at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people thought that North Korea may provoke something to help the opposition. But then surprisingly, North Korea didn't really do anything to affect Korean election. And then North Korea was not really any issue of debate either. I mean, of course, it's not presidential election, so somewhat different, but still, I don't think, there was really any debate about North Korean policy.
Mm-hmm.
But as I mentioned earlier, nonetheless, given Democratic Party's position, they may try to push the government to pay more attention to North Korea as well as China. And I think now among those newly elected people, there are a few experts on foreign policy, like former Korean ambassador to Russia, Ri Sung-rak. I think he's advising, Lee Jae-myung. And the other one, Professor Kim Jun-hyung, who was president of Academy of Diplomacy under Moon Jae-in. So I think they probably having some influence on Democratic Party thinking or approach towards foreign country. I mean, that's why even though I don't expect any major shift in foreign policy, but still some pressure on the government to pay more attention to maybe China, Russia, or North Korea, and so on.
Yeah. Right. And as the president too, President Yoon will have a little more say for foreign policy, but that could also be a ground for contention as well. For another question that we received from Karen Eagleston at Stanford, she wanted to ask more about a domestic political issue in South Korea, which was namely the medical trainee strike. And whether that was that had an impact on the election, the handling of that by President Yoon and his administration.
Yeah. Well, actually, Karen is my colleague. We have a seminar next week on this issue. But I mean, that also quite controversial because initially, President seemed to have some support from people. But then this stalemate, this negotiation with doctors went for too long. And then toward the end of the election, it kind of backfired politically. And I think President was under really, pressure to do something. But then doctors refused to talk to him or negotiate. So I think politically, looking back, it didn't help the ruling party or president. And in a sense, if anything, it kind of backfired politically. And then that's another issue, what are you going to do? Because I don't know, some of you may know that the government announced that they're going to increase the number of enrollments for medical school by 2,000 per year. And then those, fellows, interns, they all basically on strike or they resigned. And then all the doctors were protesting. And then Mr. Yoon was not willing to compromise. And he's saying that, this is a minimum, then I'm not going to, give in to any, such a pressure. But then in the end, he had to really, at least make a gesture that, he is willing to negotiate, but then doctors refuse. So, I mean, this is still ongoing issue. And now election is over. Hopefully the government and doctors, come to the table, then, negotiate. But then it's also a very difficult issue. And then that became one issue during campaign. Then I don't think it helped
Yeah.
the government or ruling party. Yeah.
Right, right. And just speaking more on some of the issues that might have come up, this was definitely a topic during the 2022 presidential election. But Deborah Nam Crane asked
Mm.
about the topic of feminism. And you kind of touched on this in your presentation, looking at kind of the gender gap in the seats, even in the government. But she wanted to ask whether the topic of feminism, since it's so related to South Korea's current demographic crisis, whether it was brought up for either side of the campaign trail and how it was.
Not necessarily.
Mm.
I think 2 years ago, as I mentioned, Lee Jun-suk, when he was leading the current ruling party, he really trying to appeal to young male, voters. And I mean, he did. So probably some people saying that, I mean, I don't agree with that strategy, but then as a campaign strategy has some, maybe certain value in producing, more votes. But I don't think this time there any such a strategy. And then, as I showed earlier, especially young female, they really supported the opposition, the liberal side.
Yeah.
And I think the ruling party failed to appeal to, young, voters who tend to be, swing voters. And once again, they may have make a difference in highly contested, district where the margin of victory was very thin. I mean, literally, I think few districts only like 500 votes difference. That's it. So, I mean, it could go either way, really thin margin. But I don't think feminism was any issue in this time.
Right, right. But as you pointed out and just mentioned, the younger voters will really be that swing vote in a lot of these elections, and so very important for
Yeah.
any party to kind of try and attract and
Mhm.
appeal to our
Mhm.
young swing voters.
Yeah.
I wanted to end on one other question we received from Tammy Overby. She wanted to ask whether you believe that the PPP will start distancing itself from President Yoon as a result of this outcome, this election outcome.
Mm. That's a good question. So I think in my own view, okay, other people may not agree with me. In my view, it's not only a defeat for ruling party. This may be a crisis for conservative in Korean politics. Okay, because 4 years ago, okay, they lost badly, and then this time, they won more seats from Gyeongsang province, but in Korea they say TK and PK, so it became kind of regional party in a sense. And then Mr. Yoon's performance didn't help the ruling party, and this time many lawmakers uh, they were very hesitant go against president because once again nomination in the process is very top down. But now 4 years later, when they're running for re-election, the Mr. Yoon will be gone because his term has only 3 years and the lawmakers have only 4 years, right?
Mhm.
So I think probably there may be some, I don't know what's the right about some contention, maybe even fighting within the party about the future direction. And as I mentioned, likely leader is maybe from the more moderate, like An Cheol-soo or Na Kyung-won, those people who can better appeal to swing voters. And then like Oh Seon-na is the mayor of Seoul. I'm sure he is also leading candidate for president from the conservative side. So I think the ruling party will have to discuss and debate about their future direction,
Right.
and then it's not impossible to imagine that Yoon Suk Yeol may have to leave the party. I mean, that's what happened to many Korean presidents, like even Kim Dae-jung and Kim Young-sam, toward the end of their tenure. They demand they leave the party because they are becoming unpopular.
Wow.
So, but in this case, it's still 3 years left.
Mhm.
I mean, a Korean presidency is very powerful. So even though he lost this election, but then, we shouldn't underestimate the institutional power of Korean presidency. So it's not like he will be easy lame duck then, do nothing. Yeah, I think he'll try to fight in some way. And so, that's why even though I keep saying that, ruling party lost and, he may become lame duck, but still we shouldn't discount the powerful institution of Korean presidency. It's a really powerful institution.
Yeah, and I actually think that is a great note for us to end on as we look at the rest of President Yoon's tenure as president of South Korea. And so I would just like to have everyone please join me in thanking Professor Shin for his insightful and thorough analysis and presentation of the Korean election.
Thank you.
I also wanted to thank Irene Kyung and Kristen Lee, Professor Shin's team at Stanford. And here at the Korea Society, I also wanted to give a huge shout out and thank you to Director of Policy, Jonathan Corrado, for all of his constant support and guidance, our media and IT team, Peter Stumecki and Bradley Sheen, for ensuring that our programs run very smoothly. And finally, our policy interns, Hiji Kim, Tashizawa, and Sonia Irvine for all of their hard work. And finally, thank you all to those who were able to tune in today. If you're interested in joining more of our policy programs here at the Korea Society, please head over to our website to learn more. We have plenty of events planned out. And thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Shin.
Okay, thank you. Bye.